So I just got back from Summer Game Fest and all the stuff that was going on there, and I have like 2 videos worth of video games to talk about. Stuff I got to see behind the scenes, stuff I got to play behind the scenes. So I have some hands-on impressions and just some stuff where I got to see kind of extended running real-time gameplay for things that we only got trailers for. I have a lot of games I want to dive into, so I'm just going to do that. But the caveat here is that a lot of these games, of course, are still works in progress. So I'm not coming down hard and judging them completely, but just trying to come and give you guys a little bit of information and some impressions. For me, going to these video game events and like checking out games is interesting because it like puts games on my radar that maybe I didn't care about or wasn't interested in. So that's my intent here with doing these videos. Also, some of the big games too, I got to touch those, so you can hear about those a little bit. So the first game I wanted to dive into is Remnant II. This is the follow-up to Remnant from the Ashes, which is a game I didn't play a ton, but one of my closest friends played a lot, so I got to hear all about it, and I appreciated what they did, but the first game kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, and what they're doing with the second one, thankfully, is not ditching what made the original important, kind of like an RPG, roguelite, run-based, endlessly playable type thing with cool guns, as like a third-person shooter with loot, which sounds like a million other games we've had, but just the way they did it was a little bit different, and they're doing that again, essentially here, with way more stuff, way more character progression, way more variation in everything, and an emphasis on like building up your specific character class or kind of play style type, and really embracing that. But what I liked the most was I just thought the game looked and played a little better. The environments are way more compelling this time around. The art style, the detail on all the characters is just way more interesting and unique feeling. Shooting still has a good feel to it. Like, it's a little bit more responsive. There's more verticality. You can climb up more stuff. I noticed that immediately, but the melee also seems to be really improved. It's got a little bit more to it than just press button to whack. But in terms of the actual character screen, when you bring that up, that seems to be the biggest thing, the biggest change with Remnant 2. There's a lot more. You're doing like weird new weapon modifiers now. You're kind of like doing weapon mutations, just way more stuff for your character, way more stuff to spec out for your kind of class that you're embracing, and even certain sub abilities within that class, ways to level up and change and alter those and tailor those to you also. And my biggest takeaway for playing for a while, I played for like a good 45 minutes to an hour, where the bosses and the fights, even just like a mid boss I got to, felt like a big, pretty crazy over the top boss. Very satisfying to fight. Some really, really cool attack animations and stuff. One boss I fought actually it felt more like Returnal. It felt like a Returnal boss, which was pretty interesting. And what I liked is that even more so than the original game was like, after hopping off and talking to some other colleagues that had played it, they had experienced different levels, some different bosses. So it still has that good randomly generated kind of everybody's coming across things in different times type of thing, that for those water cooler moments. But I'm mostly a solo player, and playing it solo, I didn't really have an issue. The questions I have remaining for this is like, how are the hardcore people going to really embrace it? Are they going to be satisfied? Is there going to be enough content there for them to satiate them? Also, like, they are doing story stuff. Like, how is that really going to play out in a setting like this, and how they're kind of like Lego pieces, all the levels that goes together? Like, I'm curious to see how that's really going to go down. Am I going to actually care about this world this time? Who knows? I don't know for sure. We might be doing a before you buy on this. I don't know yet, but the game is releasing July 25th, so we'll find out what the deal really is then. Next up, I did get to play some Crash Team Rumble. That's that multiplayer Crash Bandicoot game that is actually releasing pretty much right now. So these are just impressions of what was pretty close to the final version of the game. I'm not into it. It's just, it's not really my thing. I say that as somebody who loved Crash Bandicoot from day one and really, really loved Crash Bash. But Crash Bash, this is not. This is kind of like a multiplayer live service type of thing where it's centered kind of around one style of play where characters are running around trying to collect Wumpa fruit and fight for control of certain points and essentially cash in their Wumpa fruits. Players are going to have little cooldown abilities, and you kind of like use them at certain moments to kind of create choke points or blast players away from them getting into their Wumpa fruit net. And it just felt devoid of any real personality. That might sound harsh, but I'm coming down hard on it because like I got to see pretty much the final version of the game, and I think if it was something I downloaded for free and farted around with a little bit, I wouldn't be mad. But the thing that bothered me more is that like I liked Crash Bandicoot 4. It's About Time. Like I thought it went interesting places with the Crash Bandicoot characters and lore and stuff. Like it was just a funny, quirky new spin. I liked how it kind of jumped from the original 3 games more than the kind of Traveler's Tales, like Activision spin-off games from back in the day for like PS2 and beyond. Like I like how they embraced it there. But when you come to Crash Team Rumble, I didn't really feel any of that anymore. And to the point where they like changed the control scheme, I found to be unforgivable. I selected playing as Crash. All the characters have different like attributes and kind of specialties and stuff. Crash being kind of balanced, so I jumped in as him. But the fact that like I couldn't do a slide jump with the traditional control scheme, I was like, what are we doing here, guys? There's something so fundamentally fun about how a classic Crash Bandicoot game plays that I feel like this game could have taken advantage of, and it didn't. Granted, again, it's out. I might be coming down hard on it. Multiplayer Crash like this is not something I ever imagined, but I'm just some dumb guy. You could check it out for yourself, make your own decision. But one big thing I got my hands on that I really, really enjoyed is Mortal Kombat 1. Now, I have gameplay footage. I captured some gameplay footage. I'm okay. I've never been too good at them. I'm fighting against, I fought my way through the towers on medium for the most part just to get a feel of some of the characters. But the gameplay footage I show here, I can't show a lot of it because it's so gory that this video is going to get like flagged or demonetized or whatever. But Mortal Kombat 1 is satisfying so far. Now, it plays like the previous, but with a lot more going on. The aerial combos, when I could pull them off, seem way more complex, way more room for just like absolute nastiness. When I got like my ass handed to me by a good player or like a high level CPU, it was cool to see that stuff in action. The only thing I didn't really get to see here, and it's not really a complaint yet, is that it felt like a lot of things were turned off, where I can only play as a couple of characters. And there weren't any environmental interactions or anything like that. The things you can do in most of the modern NetherRealm games. Didn't experience any of that. It was just straightforward fighting. And thankfully, that straightforward fighting does seem to be pretty sound. I just really like what they're doing here also as somebody who has played the NetherRealm Mortal Kombat games, loved the Mortal Kombat stuff as a kid. Really not as a fighting game junkie, because I said in my Street Fighter video, I'm not, but just the characters were so cool. I always got excited about the lore, the stories. I play all of them for the campaign. I find it interesting, and I like what they're doing here. As someone who finished off the last Mortal Kombat going, okay, wow, where does this go? I like Fire God Liu Kang essentially creating a new spin on the universe. Like, to me, it just reminds me, and I've said this in other things like the Friends Per Second podcast, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but like, I really like the whole new spin on characters, like a comic book. You know the archetypes, the fundamentals of some characters, but it's so fun to see a new comic run or a what if scenario kind of take those characters and those fundamentals and remix them and run with them. And I think Mortal Kombat has been needing something like that for a long time, and it's cool to see. It doesn't mean that some people are going to be disappointed with certain characters who show up or don't show up. Probably, but that's kind of how this stuff goes. But it just made it immediately feel weird and different, because from what we've seen here and a lot of the levels I fought in, the characters look really cool. They're bright, they're colorful. Also, they made Kenshi look so sick. I also just really love Kenshi, but like the way they got him in here is so awesome. But the way they look, but also the environments they're fighting in, everything is more vibrant, bright, and colorful. And it's weird for a Mortal Kombat game, specifically because it is like more horrifically gory than we've ever seen. At least in my opinion, like from those like mid-fight like bone-breaking shots and the fatalities and stuff, like it seems like they're going even harder. So it's a really interesting and strange concept to have it kind of like bright and colorful, but still nasty and gross and evil. It's cool. Cameo system is interesting. That's where I think some fighting game players are just gonna have way more of a good time figuring out that than I am, but there is way more depth to it than I expected. It's not just press a button and that other character you selected will just pop in real quick, pop your enemy, and jump back out. No, there's more to it with like holding the button or a certain direction. The characters will do different actions, and you can time them and sometimes hold them to unleash them at the right time. But those can very easily be interrupted. I've had my Jax come out, and then my opponent actually hit Jax and he ran away. Jax was actually really tricky to get for the timing, but like Sonya and everybody, like that stuff is mostly more straightforward. Kano, it was useful to have him come out with his laser when I was dealing with enemies that were kicking my ass from a ranged distance. But for my thing, like as a non-hardcore player and who's just here for the fun of it all, I love seeing the animations and just the way these characters work. It feels so different from other games who have done these types of systems, because we have seen this type of thing before in a fighting game. But the way, like, you know, Kano will come in and he'll like push your character out of, like, get out of my way, and like start doing shit, like the way characters will kind of like duck back and let characters jump in, like they kind of interact with each other, and the animations are really cool. You know, Jax has like some cool like moments where he's like, yeah, and that just worked for me. It added to like the flavor of it all, the coolness of it all. The only other thing I'll say is that I'm curious like what characters are going to only end up as cameo fighters, and what characters are going to be cameo fighters that are also on the main roster. I don't think it's all going to shake out how some people want. Some people might find one of their favorite classic characters might only be a cameo fighter. I don't know. I don't really know how it's going to roll out, but there's that. And then my only other question, of course, is is this new story going to land? Are these new interpretations of these characters going to piss people off? Is it going to make for something compelling and new and interesting? I don't know. But of like the 4 characters I had access to, I loved picking up their regular standard moves, learning some of their new moves, figuring out Kenshi's cool ghost moves that when you execute them, it can feel super satisfying. But I'm just curious to see what the deal is with the whole game. And that's releasing September 19th. So yeah. Then Alan Wake 2. I got to see a lot of Alan Wake 2, like an actual gameplay running on a screen. We were able to confirm that, and like despite some frame drops here and there, we got to see like essentially more of a gameplay sequence compared to what you guys saw run at Summer Game Fest. Essentially, that gameplay trailer, that sequence, we got to see the lead up to that and the after that, and it's very cool, for lack of a better phrase. They are definitely not afraid that they're going into the modern Resident Evil route, where it controls and inventory and weapon swapping with the D-pad stuff reminds me very much of Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I don't really have a problem with that at all. And it's interesting because it still ties in the old Alan Wake gameplay, but I'm curious to see if it's going to be better this time around, a little less repetitive, because you got to see Saga do it a lot, shine a light at somebody, open them up for the vulnerability, and then fire away. Variations I got to see with that here involve like running and hiding underneath like a lamppost, and the light means they won't come towards you, and then you can kind of heal or rethink and run out and shoot them again. It didn't seem that interesting though. And then there's of course a dodge, and I got to see more gameplay of like the shotgun. In our gameplay sequence, Saga took the shotgun, loaded that, and started blasting into dudes, and it seems like they got some satisfying gunshot type stuff. Obviously it doesn't play like Control, it's way more like over the shoulder third person shooting, but the punchiness, the pop of those guns from that game that I really liked seems to have translated over here. But what it had going for me was atmosphere and like actual good spooky woods. I always talk about video game woods, and here they had some really dense good stuff with the wind blowing, the breeze, the rain coming down. You're walking through the woods with your partner Alex Casey, and he is just chewing the scenery, complaining about his ex-wife. The Max Payne voice, McCaffrey still does such an incredible job. They definitely embraced the universe. I saw a lot of Easter eggs and stuff I won't spoil, but the game also has save room types of things, like a Resident Evil type save room, but their own spin on it that I think people are really gonna like. It just makes sense. But one thing I really like that hasn't been highlighted too much is the mind place. So while they are going all in, like we've seen it, they are doing survival horror. A spooky guy will walk towards you and you shoot him until you run out of bullets, and then you stress out about finding more bullets, right? But they're also leaning really hard into the detective stuff. So at the push of a button, kind of like a pause or an inventory type screen, it'll instantly zoop Saga, who I got to see most of the gameplay of, in a completely different place. So you'd be out there in the field doing your detective stuff, your FBI stuff, and then with the press of a button, instantly she's in her cozy sweater in a log cabin. There's coffee on the table, and you can freely explore this log cabin. And apparently, like, this is where you're going to look through old files, upgrade your weapons and stuff like that, but also put clues together. You can freely walk up to a wall on the log cabin and piece clues together, notes, photographs, things you learn, and that actually is going to apparently trigger certain things and move certain elements of the story along. There's like a deduction thing. It seems like it's more in depth than I thought. and like actual detective-y type work, like a Sherlock Holmes game or something. And I'm curious to see how it's going to go down and how they're going to make good on some of that stuff, because just the ability to instantly jump into what they've called her mind place, I like that. Kind of had this like weird True Detective vibe to it, and they're just going for it. We did ask, and apparently Alan Wake is going to have his own version of that when you play as him, because I don't know if you guys have heard this, it's essentially 50-50 split between the new character Saga and Alan Wake. So I'm curious to see what his spin on that is, and generally what more of his gameplay is like. But Saga as a character at first seemed very simple, very one note. I think her jacket looks cool. Just playing as a regular FBI agent's kind of cool, but she seemed very simple. But honestly, a lot of her dialogue felt like it was written by an author. It felt like it was book dialogue, which I get. But then towards the later half of the demo, I got to see kind of her human angle, the personal angle of her story, and then I was a little more interested. I don't know what they're going to do with her. I don't know if it's going to land. I don't know if it's going to be like a Snake riding Metal Gear Solid 2 thing, but where they set it up, and I'm not spoiling anything, like where they set up Alan in this whole situation, very interesting, and I'm excited to play more. Granted, I just really like Remedy games, so that's my bias right there. But the amount of detective work kind of took me by surprise. That jumping to the mind place instantly just seemed really impressive. And yeah, I'm excited to have a spooky game to play this fall for the Halloween season. You know, that's just me. I'm simple. Oh, then I got to see Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. The Ubisoft showed off a bunch of stuff about that, but I got to see it a little bit more in depth. And it is very much the Ubisoft Avatar Far Cry game. I don't necessarily think that's bad, but I don't know how it's going to work for everybody. Like if you're a hardcore gamer and maybe you're just like over the Far Cry thing, maybe not. But if you're more casual or you just love Avatar and you want to live in Pandora, this seems like a decent way to do it. The story angle seems all right. There's a new big bad corporate guy who seems kind of generic, but the whole spin on you essentially being someone who was a Na'vi but ripped away from your home, kind of conditioned into a soldier and then plopped back in, is essentially their take on justifying a Na'vi being like Jake Sully, but not just being Jake Sully. So I don't know how that's going to go, but I just got to see a little bit more like in-world navigation, right? Like I got to see flying around more, which technically does seem really impressive, and also riding on mounts on the ground. I got to see a lot more of that. And my two big questions are, so I still didn't get to see a lot of like moment to moment, like unedited combat go down. I want to see how that goes against humans and stuff. And my other question is, from a technical standpoint, like Pandora is incredibly detailed. Lush, deep jungles, vines, flowing water, glow-in-the-dark plants, floating islands. Like this game is embracing all that. And like when you see screenshots and when you see the gameplay and the trailers, like it is visually overwhelming. But I'm curious to see how the game is really going to keep up with all that, because that's wild. That's really ambitious. On the bright side, at least, like it seems like they're not straying too far from like what makes Avatar. Like this very much just feels Avatar. And there's a lot of people who just aren't into that, or they like to make fun of Avatar. Whatever. There's a lot of people that absolutely love it. And I really like it. So I'll be giving this one a shot. Mark me as skeptical for this one, but like having a Na'vi, and like I got to see an inventory screen with weapons, you know, Na'vi weapons, human weapons, and then having like head, shoulder, body, and leg, I believe, gear. Seems like that can be interesting, just like an Avatar RPG light, because every game has that. I don't know. Again, we'll see how this one goes. This one's dropping in December. Then last but certainly not least, this comes out in July. This isn't too far away, but Immortals of Avalon. This is essentially an EA Originals published first-person shooter adventure campaign, and it's from a new studio kind of established to just make stuff, and this is their IP they're rolling with, essentially tactical elite wizards in a magical land. And a lot of the development team is apparently behind stuff like the original Dead Space campaign and Call of Duty campaigns, and that's how it was pitched to me, kind of like what if entertaining, thrilling, big budget Call of Duty campaign was actually about video gamey ass wizards and magic and stuff. And I liked how it's very much aware of what it is. This is a game that clearly loves its own goofy lore. It tells you a lot about it. And it's not this massive open world thing. It's an adventure you play through. And it feels a little bit like a throwback, but with some really good new visuals and crazy effects going on screen. I like the creativity of some of the areas. From the Summer Game Fest thing, we got to see like that massive level, like where you're on like a mech essentially fighting your way up it. The combat seems satisfying enough. It's all hand magic based, but I didn't get to see a lot of like actual elemental magic. It's essentially different colors, and every color is a different type of gun. So what I experienced wasn't a lot of like stacking magic or stunning enemies or slowing enemies down. It was just one magic is pistol, one magic is shotgun, one magic is machine gun, which that's fine. You know, it's different. It doesn't have ADS. So essentially what you're doing is you have a whip that can pull enemies towards you, and then you shoot them, which seems like that can make for some interesting combos. There's that. There's like an air dash, a regular dash, like a shield that will surround you, and ultimate attacks on not on cooldowns, on these crystals that you pick up. Those are a little bit more satisfying because that's like when your character will like slap his hands together and rub it and then shoot out a magic thing that just blasts rocks out of the ground or a temporary wall or like a buff or something. Like that's what I like. And there's a lot of story and cutscenes. Like you're just like, hey, I'm a video game protagonist guy, but like you're going through this adventure, you're learning about this world through their eyes because you're getting these powers, and it's a big deal. I don't know if this one is going to like blow the world away or anything like that, but like again, it knows what it is. It knows it's like, again, I overuse this phrase now, but this is like a video game, a shooter, first person adventure, like a Bulletstorm type of thing, or something you would see on PS3, 360. And I know it's not full priced, so like they get it at least. I just don't know how good it's actually going to be because I got to play like a level or so. And I don't know how long it's going to actually, you know, like those things are a matter of pacing and whether or not they're going to outstay their welcome. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But those are some games I played from Summer Game Fest and surrounding events that I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a scoop on. That's what I felt. Again, these are all games work in progress. So who knows how they'll actually end up, but just some rough information and impressions from your boy truly. There are more games I want to talk about, but I don't have time in one video, so keep your eyes peeled for another one of these dropping in a couple of days. A lot more to talk about, like Prince of Persia, some Final Fantasy stuff, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Forza, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you for being here. If you've listened to me talk for this long about video games, clicking the like button helps me, because all I do here is just talk about stuff that interests me. I try to just talk about stuff I like, so if you like that vibe, I'm here. But I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.